We are live. It's me, Susanna. So, this video is going to be way more extensive than showing facts, but it's going to be really classically pretty funny and factual if what I say is correct. So, this is a response video to Katie Roby, but it's really technically not, because like I talked about, there's a lot of cards being played on all of us and a merging of personalities into what is called the host. Now the host takes on other spirits, whether it's through alcohol or through mediumship, and it's kind of like people that have so many lifetimes in one day that they get a little confused. So for the sake of historical accuracy in my life, on my timeline, I will go all the way back to a very important story that bridges the evidence that I have that I've written out. Now that's pretty wild, but you guys know I do this research, and then I figure out more as it goes, because it really is eurythmy, which is speech, flow, and action. And so I think it's all inverted. So whether you say FVCKING, which is unpronounceable, or say the cuss word, I'm not going to do it. Everybody knows who I'm talking about. And that would be Ms. Wonderful. Now, Reggie Delaney, who directed the Hair Emporium Follies so long ago, is who I am referring to. The card in St. Louis that was playing today when she said she was 53, because seriously, I'm 56 and Reggie was older than me. So historically, like, for example, Daniel Soap is really 64. He claims to be 57. Everything is spellcast to try to start a new cycle or do whatever. Magic is going to happen. And since computers are the best at numbers, that's why they're so into banking and how easy it is to trip the system. So when Katie's Dirty Deleted Live was going on, and of course I was there, taking that into evidence, speaking to her and playing copyright-free music. She knows I'm speaking to her. They tune into my frequency or anybody else's. And that's how these EMP weapons and different hackings of this high technology that nobody really knows about, I believe operates, especially at times of great shift and times that we've really never been aware of. So anyhow, for my time travel, which is no such thing, but it really is, because when you are able to visualize it and it's your real life and you can go back and see into it, things that are so painful that you really never bring up again. And Reggie was one of the most painful. So she was almost famous, and she had a huge pin about this big that somebody got her, and it hung on her station. And like I said, she was the director of the hair Emporium Follies. Now, why that's important is because her and I had a joint bank account during that time. And there was money mysteriously that disappeared back then. And, you know, at that time, I mean, in 1991, I wouldn't even have been, that sounds really weird. Hang on. So 64 to 2004, I would have been 40. And then we minus 20. That is still not working. All right, 36 years from 64 to 2000. 64, okay, 36. I was 37. And that sounds too old because I would have been pregnant with Ian. All right. You know I'm nervous, but we're being okay with this. And since Katie believes nobody's listening to me and I talk to myself, you know, it's like there's a whole host of energies and they're all of course streaming this and making their cuts and doing their things as we speak. So it's really hard to handle that with the whole collapse of what could be whatever could be today. But in the same time, I did speak to the Federal Trade Communication, and I know that they could only give me the, government site where you go and then you start filing your complaints. And when you really read it and it says, we don't really have any affiliation with this website, but it looks official. I had already been there so many times. I kind of like the fraud room that has been digitalized, I'm going to say, since early 2000. All right, so one more time, I'm going to try to figure out my age. I'm born in 1964. I'd be 36 at 2000. Oh, well, here's where I'm messing up. I was acting like I went too far. 64 to 84. That's the 20. And then we have 11 more. I was 31. Ding, ding, ding. See, that figures that I was 31 because, 33 is going to be a major crisis. And 28 is the end of your karma-free years. And that 30 to 33 represents the journey in the desert. So if you're thinking about, like if it's okay to talk about the man we know as Jesus, that he was out walking and speaking and doing, and people were starting to really check out what he was doing. So 31, there was really a million things going on. It still doesn't seem like Chelsea could have been that old. Is there something wrong? 64 to 84 is 20 years. From 84 to 91 is 7 more years. 7 to the 20, so I'm 27. I can't believe this is so hard, but it, like I said, it does make a lot of sense. So I'm having a major block. And I'm 56 now, and it's my Saturn return. So 64 to 84 is 20 years. Add 7 to that. So, if you're not born at 0, which I believe that we are human from that time of very early conception on. Um, they used to do charts like that, and many people realized that when your baby turns 1, and there's 1 candle on the cake, depending on if you look at it like half empty or half full, you could realize that you've completed 1 full cycle on your first birthday and that you are starting your 2nd year. So a lot of Steiner and anthroposophy starts out with a screeching attack from the time like we talked about in Europe in the mid to late 1860s, 1850s forward, whenever Steiner is born, and I think that's in 1860 something. My luck, it's 1864. I don't know. But even though he was born on February 25th, historically, they give February 27th as his date of birth because they used to register it as the day of your baptism. And so, historically, in European culture, children were baptized immediately, not so much to save them from the baby getting sold to the devil at auction night or anything. It's more like you can't have a kid that's a couple weeks old and take it, take the child to be presented for baptism, and the baby just doesn't look like a newborn. I think that's why they wiped the terminology on the first 4 weeks of a baby's life, even at full term, is termed as neonatal. And that was in the atomic information that we went over because these things have an effect on newborn children. And that was one of the terms that you needed to know. So, yeah, I'm not even on my walk in the desert. I'm right out of my karma-free years. And there's Reggie all over the place. And this woman was so good. I mean, like, pulling off scams that she didn't even get a police record until she assaulted me at the hair emporium and went crazy and threw rocks in the window, and it was ugly. And she was on cocaine, and I was innocent, and she said, you need to tell me if I'm doing this again and get me to stop. And that's what I did that Halloween. I was out in the front of the Pearl Vision, which was the hair emporium, and I was decorating it for Halloween. So we would put like cotton bales up. Not cotton, I'm sorry. Hay. All I'm hearing is hay is for horses. But we had dummies and the hair heads. You make like monsters and tie them to stuff, and it was really pretty cool. Now, at that time, our motto was we're your major retail source. And I did professional education, and the hair shop was like a big fishbowl. So there were windows that surrounded all of it. And believe it or not, the landlord's name was Door. And that's so fascinating because we have Jimmy and Steph, who I identified as Jimmy and Julie, and it was John Door who was the landlord. And that building no longer stands. So it's like the curse of Vernon. When my business started out, every place that I had been in Hazelwood would eventually be torn down. Not because of me, because they built a car lot on this trade center, and it was all office buildings, and that was where the first place the hair emporium was in these two identical buildings. They weren't towers, but I'm working code too. So there were two identical buildings, and one was called the Flaming Pit Banquet Center, and people had wedding receptions and parties. I mean, it wasn't like as cool as having a party on the Admiral or nothing. It was on land. But at that time in North County, it replaced the top of towers. So they were older buildings that at one time were pretty cool. So there was the reception building, and then the building that I was in was the office building, and they were all small businesses. So it's about code and about names. So a guy named Larry is the landlord, and he allows me to rent my space there. That's when I discover that I'm surrounded by people that are showing me this side of life that I would have never expected to see. And so when I mean that, I mean no other than who I call Dan Sote. That's a real person that worked out of the trade center. Him and Ed ran the phone room for the Fraternal Order of Police. It was a deal they made with the cops. The cops got 10%. What you need to realize is we're going to be working it would be so easy to say before 2000 and after, but there's a major source of time right here that is the earliest part of defrauding of my name, the hair emporium, the financial troubles, the divorce with Tim, all of it. And to see it that way and know how the whole thing was handled anyhow in this weird town where it's like a bad movie set for reality TV. But I'm weird because I'm telling the story that's the most accurate. Right. But by 1992, see, all the data that's collected by the computer would have picked up my earliest educational stuff because I typed on the keyboard and then I did cut and paste. And Tim yelled at me because I was doing hard returns and I didn't want to ever be online. And then all these things happened and they tell me to get offline, and it's like, but wait, we got major problems happening here. So these things really did always happen historically in my life, but to look at it through the eyes of the paperwork that goes back to 2002 when my ex strong-armed me into filing bankruptcy. We had 2 salons. One was going to be where he hung out in Crestwood, and I've told you the belly up with Crestwood, and I'm talking about Officer Hoffmeister and the digital policing being the first. Crestwood was a pretty highfalutin area for socioeconomically irrelevant and don't even have a vote count place like here in a divided state. So, there are so many things that point back to the time of Reggie and when she went crazy and stalked me actively back then. I had enough evidence that she was found guilty in the Florissant court of law, and then she was caught stealing from Deerberg's. And then at that time, she lived in a trailer, so I have to tag and put a card on Terry Joyce's short bus trailer because, like I said, there's a lot of cards going on, and I could do shows and shows about this, but that isn't relevant to the collapse of the system and my witness that I do know people hears globally. I never believe their lies. That's part of the demons that talk at you and mock you and poke at you and make fun of everything that you are, where they are admittedly irate and unstable, to say the least, without getting too graphic. But it is a mental illness, and it's also greed, and it's also aging. So Reggie would be, if I think Dan's 64, I'm going to say Reggie is just a year or 2 older. They already have her records, and she's well known to the system, very heavily involved. They know about the background with her being in the Monarch program. I mean, they groomed her. I had never heard stories like this at 21, but see, they can merge together like all these groupings that we're seeing happen as they throw aspects of themselves under the bus and curse their own natures, which are now in a video game holographic matrix that they used all their tokens or whatever in the machine, and they can't get out and they need help. And, that's why I just take everybody down. It's kind of what I realized to be true about that. Okay, so back in the day of the Trade Center, Dan had a sweetheart, and her name was Teresa. And Teresa was from Oklahoma. Dan was from Indiana. Dan came to St. Louis and was here until his stint in jail. And then he rode off into the sunset. And that was in 85. So, see, Dan and Reggie in real life could and would have known each other. She even lived right next to the Trade Center. So whether we're talking about portals or jumps or seeing a side of what technology misused can do to our world, and we can call it many different things, but by the time everybody's done screaming, there'll be nobody left. And that would be my appeal to whomever goes through this and absorbs the data. Let's say that. Because you know they all do. So, Reggie left the bank account in debt. We had the fallout. Dan left. It's kind of like it was almost at once, but when you're having trauma and people that you love just flip out on you, you know, the best you can do is keep breathing. And that's basically what happened when poof, all of a sudden, for no reason, $30,000 was lifted off the open credit of a charge card that the card, when it had expired and everything was fine, and the new ones came, were no good. And then ones were reissued that wound up not being good or just getting cut off later on. So I have to go back to Reggie being in the secretarial pool and being able to run an apartment complex and to have been known for doing a lot of sexual favors, and the original ones were with underage boys that were her daughter's friends, and that was tormenting to her, and that's Danielle and Dallas. So, you know, what I've seen, get back, get back, get back. However it's been manifested, is so elaborate and so premeditated. And then I think that's why the silly 20 and back is so important, because it really shattered everybody's reality through the years, as I had explained to them about in sociology class, how Professor Wittenberg, and then, you know, there's part of me that wants to call him Wittenberger, like, but I'm going to say Wittenberg, Luther North. He said the collapse of the middle class had already happened in 1980. So when a professor says that, they're speaking at a higher level of knowledge that knows the inside track and has lived long enough to have observed, I would say, a whole generation where he would remember it. And so a generation would have been 40 years. And you realize you're a part of the great big world around the age of 9. And that comes up to the priesthood initiation point of 49 years old. And that's why this is so important, because so many people aren't lucky enough to even make it to 49. And there's many people that feel that you're old, whether it's at 49, 39, or 29. And those are all markers for the ending. All right. So, I have so many things, way many more than I would have ever imagined. And I have never, ever, never, ever, 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 ever said that I was perfect. And I was just sharing my experience and what I had learned. But that all got turned around on me. And of course, it was for a reason. And that had come down to the Utaco uranium, the DuPont nickel, and the Vista petroleum stocks, which are being looked at currently, and that's why all the hubbub's going on with that. There's also my grandmother's vested interest vested into Ma Bell. And believe it or not, it's still Southwest Bell. It's still Ma Bell. But it does business as now AT&T. And when stocks are that old, and when you realize how valuable it is, and how many hands that it's crossed paths of, if you have a corporate structure full of compromised individuals that know about a fortune like that, it makes sense why, even as a minor in 1985, and I'm right on the line, I'm turning 21, but it's published when I'm still 20. And either way it goes, my brother's almost 5 years younger, and I'm not in the historic roster. And even though my brother is and my cousin is, they always hide the truth on the mother's bloodline side. And that goes back to the secrets of the women in my family, which I never knew about. These are things that I can't even imagine how they, dealt with. Whether it would be my grandmother who never spoke of her mother, or my mom, and I know what she had to endure. And she was an only child. And to see what my kids have had to go through, not even to mention everything I've gone through, which is too traumatic for people to deal with. And that takes you right back to the original accusation of Melanie Vermees Spencer of the Conscious Consumer Network, who said that my story was too traumatizing and I should do research on WikiLeaks and make shows. And I mean, I've always had my own way of doing presentations, and to pay someone a donation and they want to micromanage you, but tell everybody else that they don't have any control over your, content, and make these silly games. And to realize now what it was at that time, and how the money I paid them allowed them not only to steal from me and hack more into a system that had already been hacked. To me, that's brilliant. I mean, in a bad manner. And because, see, artificial intelligence can only learn negative things. And that's why the whole comment with Cliff High and the web bots and the negative reports, and the guy that wanted to give him the world if he could give him a positive report. And Cliff said he couldn't. And that's Cliff's testimony. And, the whole thing about Chandler raising money for who's coming after him while all my money's being drained from my accounts, because they do this breach, which, of course, today will be easily shown. And you would think the house of cards would come tumbling down, but if the computer is real, I mean, how weird is that to say? That it would easily know all these things. It would know all the numbers and all the data, and have already researched these things out. And we're in the U.S. National Archives, which today it was so weird. And this is why I have to go back to the IC3.gov, which is where you get caught in another web. That's why I'm doing it like this. And then they would see the serious of the nature and listen to it, and I would document it and all that. But since it's all being watched as it's happening, I've never felt the need for that because I do take this work serious. And it is my life. My career was not a joke. My love for my children was not a joke. My love for Joe or for the other men was never a joke. And I'm completely heterosexual, and that has been joked. So I get all the jokes, and I get the movies, and I get the books, and I get all the stuff because I've been a target so long. And I don't say that so people will pity me. I mean, see, but if everybody's imitating me and then they're trying to do it too, that's the focus. See, it's always been said imitation is the sincerest form of flattery. And that statement always made me kind of want to burp, which means puke. I don't like it. And I've heard it too many times. And Reggie was faking it till she made it with her skills in hairdressing. And she did have a bleach blonde tuft in the front. It was very punk rock. She was full figured plus, and she wore these neon pink, the stretchy pants. I mean, you never seen anything like her for real. And when you're a hairdresser, the last thing that you do is like mock anybody's personal style. And the weirder, the better. And that's why I never fit in too well in the hair industry because I didn't look the way they wanted me to look. And it always goes back to the handling. You know, we can make you better or we can improve the way you function. And I think that leads us into the problem that a lot of humans got a fevered mind virus from becoming human servers and being plugged into dirty systems where there's a virus or a worm released in the computer. Okay, so before I start with the numbers, I have to go back and reiterate that Katie's challenge to me because she said Sophia's Emporium is weird, and she was poking and saying you'll never figure it out, and that's part of the spell in her movie. And I can't do anything about that. I never said I could. It's only about what we can do for ourselves, and if we're honest, it'll work. And so that's why, and it's now after 3, but I'm engaged before that because that was part of the spell as well, that they already know everything that is happening. The satellites watch, the Google Dot watches. We know how the technology is. But I'm not weird. I operated a successful small business that people that are weird, that always had grudges against me, that wear masks online with phony faces and camera and lighting tricks and merging with other co-conspirators. They become new versions of themselves, and that's why it was so easy for me to say, that's so and so. Because I do see it happen on the screen. And for anyone to not realize what's truly going on with this technology, I mean, people couldn't even explain TVs or movies. So to me, it's redundant, and there's always new technology. If they can't see, then they're really blind. And a lot of people that are online do go blind. So I don't doubt these things. Okay, like I said, before the trouble hits the fan, because we're looking at decades, I am getting a letter written from someone that worked up high enough at US Bank to, let's say, sponsor me in good faith, because according to the state records, I've been the sole proprietor since February 27th, 2002. And we do want to tag 227 because it's a cast on 225, oddly enough. And the state real estate license since April 15th, 1996, all in my name. Susie was never a signer on the old account. Tim was. The account was overdrawn. Susie came in and deposited into the account to get the account current and at a zero balance. So just to show you how seriously I take my life moving forward, and to get away from Tim, because he destroyed the banking and we had filed bankruptcy. So there was time where someone, and US Bank couldn't say who, and they never did, who took the name off my DBA using my tax ID number. That's part of the mystery. So why couldn't US Bank answer that question back then? And why did Tim put his social security number on my account without my permission? And then we get into all the divorce stuff and the idea that he said that I would never have custody of the kids, and I had parental custody, and he came from a messed up background and was involved in Scientology and altar boy stories, and very disconnected. But I feel like Tim has a card not only in Craig Ferguson, but in CW and a lot of other people. And as I say these things, you have to realize that that's why it's so important, if you choose to have sex with someone, to realize that you're really having sex with every person they had sex with, and how serious it can destroy your life, and it can give your children a lot of problems. And then you get into the abortion debate, and it's just terrible. But you know, it's really sociology. It's really Rudolf Steiner. It's really trying to get to the root of human suffering, which is always something I believed in, even as a hairdresser. First, do no harm. Don't use toxic products. Share what you know with others when they ask you, why don't you get sick? Or whatever they ask you, That was me as an open book because my first child I had at 23 and had a salon at 21 and a husband that worked. And I took a playpen and raised my kid. I mean, I took her to a daycare, but there was a molestation there, and she didn't even tell me for years. And how can you keep something secret like that? I mean, it's just so weird, but it's right across from the oldest Vatican temple in Florissant and its sister cities to Ferguson, and then we've got the John James BTC because of me, and it's more back into this casting. And I never meant to offend anyone that was Catholic, and I don't even think that they were really aware of it, and I'm sure it shattered their reality, no other than any of the things I've spoken about, but that's not my fault. And they've always killed the messengers, especially if there's money to be had or to steal my data and put it in their bad corporation. I mean, maybe that's why I'm not being harassed on the phone so much today. Maybe the highest levels are watching, which is what I've always believed. And behind the scenes have retrieved all this because I've taken the time to do actual work and put my whole self into it. And, if somebody's going to hire you to do a job, they really want to see if you can do the job. And then they make bets about nobody can do the job, we're all going to die. I'm not saying I'm the only person that can do the job. That's silly. But it's everybody's narcissism because they're making movies from their own perspective and putting them at the center and then just attacking everybody else. And that is not by any stretch what I have done, and everybody knows it. And that's why now someone else controls my channel, and all these other channels are going down, and the threats are happening, and the things are getting stolen. And like, I'm getting threatened that they'll take all my stuff away. What? Even if I pay on 3 charges and hold bank accounts just because of one, you can choose to be that dictator during a time of national emergency and COVID and pandemic and banks and institutions and stores and all of these things being closed down, while all the people that know how to hack are having their last hurrah. That is not American. That is not ethical. That is not moral. That is an artificial intelligence or someone that's being puppeted. And most people are being puppeted. So it's all real. And this right here begins the implosion with the bank that Reggie and I had the joint account that she took care of because she was running the Follies. And then money came up missing. So 1991. Now, back to this. The idea that US Bank nor Tim Pratt changed the name and they don't have a signature from me. Well, then someone at a federal level involved in banking would have been the person that would have known that answer unless the hacking was so ahead of its time, which all of this is. I mean, that's the thing. Like they tell you, it's secretly 150 years more advanced than what they give us poor schleps, you know? Everything's inverted and twisted, and a lot of people lost everything when they were let go from corporations after they were all magically turned into yuppies and were greedy and would sell out their own mom and freaked out in their crisis years when they were living high on the hog. But it was about, I mean, it's pages, but the whole number is like $740 odd. And that is what I paid down to the zero balance. And the date of this is July 7th, 2009. And here again, it's the customer service manager of the U.S. Bank Waterford office. And she's writing a stellar letter for me so I can get this credit. Now, that's great. But after the Mike Brown thing, and I had always paid my bills and my credit score was off the charts, I really worked hard. And I don't spend, and I'm not a materialist. So, when the Mike Brown thing happened and we went under martial law, and there was the war in this town, they kept increasing my credit limit, which I never wanted them to do. I never asked for, but everything was just getting pushed through. And since we're on decades now, we're looking back at this time where the implosion of the housing and the bank bailout happened, 2008. And you have to tag that to Ferguson, civil unrest, martial law. The character, the actor, known as Darren Wilson, and how did George Floyd replace Mike Brown when Mike Brown was the relevant story here in this world? But to give somebody so much credit just so you can charge them interest, which is what's happening to me now, is the way I'm taking my stream. You can see the setup for the same implosion. Now, in 2008, we had just went into our first year of living down here in the building that winds up being the Matrix at 25 South Florissant, where many people, including Craig Ferguson, would have connections, and many of the musicians, and even the Circle on Nashville TV with the Reverend Al Green concert. I mean, I've seen every bit of that building, and you can tell the walls and how high the electric, in an old building, it's almost guardrail height. And then you have the big box, where the plugins are and where the stage was and where the curtains could be. It's easy for me to see that whole thing because I've lived in that building. But it's a very odd place, and that's where the scarab manifested as well. So while Terry Joyce talks about the guy that had the rights to the Matrix, what I'm telling you is you wind up finding out there's many matrices and portals in a video game that also affects real life with real buildings, with real people. And I think that that's an agreeable statement. So hopefully this is something that helps this virus that has gone global, which is getting people sick, and the computer shuts it down. That's the point of what I'm doing. So this is so nerve-wracking because I can show a receipt where I make a payment that they won't admit that I paid, and that's all over here. But to say that you can jump interest up on somebody and still not say where the 30 grand magically comes out of the account, that your payment could balloon up to $1,600 on a $7,000 balance on an account that used to have $38,000 as a credit limit, that overnight goes down to zero. That's the answer that I need. And so what I did, because it's so unbelievable as the stress is hitting you and you're trying to get somebody on the phone and you can't, and you know the fraud room has been mirrored and cloned, and then to be told that I am confined to only this bank and that most of the US banks are closed, and there's this thing that's happening real quick while everybody's looking at some other bobble. I believe that is where they lose their 5 stars, because you really can't house a Federal Reserve, and I'm talking about St. Louis, or mine data or monitor what they call cryptocurrencies, without being ready to spit these numbers out of the computer, because if not, and the computers are very fallible, and when they get viruses, they do kick out wrong numbers, which is a clear case of what's going on here, that somebody needs to stop the press. We need to quit watching virtual conversations of real life characters that are either fighting for their lives in a video game, or they've already lost their minds. And, you know, especially here in St. Louis, I mean, shoot, St. Louis City Mayor's resigned, and she definitely had the mind virus. And so did Parsons. And so when they say if you get COVID and you recover, like I told you, it's on a cycle. They lose more brain cells, their fever spikes, they get sick and they're wearing a mask and they get sores. That's why I told everybody about the simple thing of being sincere about raising your immune system and admitting what's going on, and realizing there's no magic pill, and that we've gone through the effects of atomic warfare. All right. So what I'm going to zip through real quick is looking at the August 2020 statement. And on this paper, which there's no account number or anything, so I can hold this up because this helps me learn. See, and even if you think that you're talking to yourself, that's like saying, hey, cheat on that homeschool college years while nobody's watching, I learned something. And then I hope somebody sees it at a higher level. So here again, hi, Gypsy Warrior. Well, see, now we're back to am I born at 0 or not? But hang on a second. So here we are, and you're seeing the numbers. And at that time, my credit line is 38,000, and the available credit is $31,124 and 88 cents. So I bring this into evidence as the incentive of why somebody would want to hack me, because the internet is very volatile. And because they would call me a patsy because I was computer illiterate and I refused to become modernized and get involved. Now, see, why would you think I'm diagnosed with anything for using my brain? And that is so sad. So I can't really believe that you would be a human that claims to have friends or know anything of empathy or of business or of life. So I'd have to ask you, why is that your opening question? Is it just because you're a warrior? Or why are you against me? Because there's a million other people that actually do have those problems, and they have full-blown shows where they talk to imaginary people. Where me, that's not what I have ever been doing. So you either believe or you don't. I'll wait for some kind of a response, and if not, I'll report what you're saying. But hey, they already saw it. So Gypsy Warrior says, Suze, have you been diagnosed with schizophrenia or something similar? Well, no, Gypsy Warrior, but I'll tell you this much. 80% of the people on YouTube have been. So this is about bullying a minority. And I don't take medication either. So if that's my choice, why would anyone be judging me instead of taking care of themselves at this time where people are dropping daily? And the fear from this plague is sweeping over them. And they've got sores and oozing and pain and anger. Why are they on the internet? Oh, and why did Katie do this? These are her words. She says I'm her sister. She actually flip-flops herself with me and then actually says I'm weird while she cries and screams and flounces around. And that's why I tried to explain earlier, if you had ever studied sociology, if I know that that is a real life person on the ground known as Reggie Delaney, and also as Montegraph Daniel Soat's partner, the phone room scammer, Teresa from Oklahoma, well, then you must not like true crime, because this isn't drama. This is my life. So I have no idea what you're interested in. But I'll tell you this much. A bot named Omar Corona claimed the responsibility for spreading that virus at the old Wuhan video game championship. So I hope you're not a big gamer. That sucked for you. And, you know, another thing that's happened is when the story went off about, you know, the big scam about the Social Security numbers being hacked, they put that out there because they had hacked mine through the Lowe's app. So tag that. And I had paid my Lowe's credit card off. But as I was paying it down, magically all of a sudden when I was putting in the last four of my social, they'd give me the beep, beep, beep. My social has been hacked. So, like you come to find out, if they got your social, they can do anything. And that easily has happened to me. So, for the people with the mental illness that don't think it's weird, I mean, we should ask them how they've dealt with their identity being stolen, since they're the experts of whatever it is. It's the harassment and the gang stalking is what's so ugly. And that people would make these death threats and raise money and say that I'm dead. So, see, they've killed me off literally about a dozen times. I'd say 4 when I'm in a car, and that's all been documented, and I've got the background on that. And being behind a firing squad at a gun range and being burnt, and I mean, sure, I've had my brushes with death, but they say when you get up and keep moving and be honest and don't hate, that you really don't die. And that's something. And then there's zombies that are not even really alive, and they're bugs from the movies. And oh, wait, but they're actual clinical medical worms and parasites. And I've spoke about all that, and that's why they call me a giraffe. I stuck my neck out so far, and people treated me like crap and took advantage of it so they could steal. And that's what they already know. So, for example, if somebody is demanding $770 after an address of breach where $30,000 goes missing with no list of explanation of how and why, and they want to put $173.22 on interest, you really don't think that's a Federal Reserve breach? But see, the bank isn't even really open. They just pretend to be. And in the cell phone group works their little hack, and everything's closed down at the government. And we've got a video game president, for those of you that don't know. So, yeah, I'll make my witness as I go, because I'm a living woman that you guys make fun of and say I'm a man or an artificial intelligence, which goes back to you guys being bots and data collectors. And if nobody really ever knew about the internet, then I don't really see why anybody would debunk that or acting like they would have otherwise evidence. But it is a major breach, and it's extortion. So if you're going to double up in payments when they were never over 200 before the 30 grand got lifted, which no explanation is given. If you were that person holding that account, you would ask someone, you would go around and do the best you could to put together your evidence. So maybe one day a court would listen to you. I've been waiting for somebody to look at my evidence, and that's what you guys all know. And that's why my URL that I'm supposed to have as Sophia's Emporium is always replaced with some kind of handshake one, some kind of flip of the numbers, some kind of compromise on my channel so all you guys can do whatever it is y'all do. But what you want to notice is that September 20th statement there. See, all of a sudden, there's no available credit, where the month before that, there was $31,124.88. Now, if I can produce an official bank receipt, which I have, that proves that I made a good faith payment when they jumped everything up to and over, what are we up to? We're up to like 688. If you don't have any other money and you're in a time of COVID and of crisis and lockdown, and you give somebody everything you have, which is $200, and then they have the audacity to eat up 176 of it and change and interest, and then shove a late fee on it, when my receipt said it was paid on the 10th, it was due on the 10th. If somebody was working with the date wheel, you know about that. It's in the video manager of YouTube. It was a real thing. Now, for example, today, I won't be able to make a minimum payment of $1,061 when they can't even tell me where the 30 grand went. So here's what they were expecting to do if they could get by with it, which I would make a serious appeal to anyone, that would be a complete and utter terroristic attack, whether you want to blame a corporation or the individual. You can't go to the place where you just accept the fact that there's no answer given for 30 grand gone, when the charges were always paid. But to take one of two charge cards connected to a business account, and neither of those cards were any good when they were reissued, and we have that trace, which the computer does. But like I said, everything's so micromanaged at the bank, they can only look at one aspect of your account. Well, if you need to look at two accounts under the same bank account, and that's the way U.S. banks set it up, not the way I asked for it. So here again, you're seeing a laying of cards on a real life story, and that is what intellectual, scientific, and medical people can tell about me. I am not making this up. This is a real thing. They know my background and my history. I have awards and honors. All that's being ignored because my DBA was stolen. And now there's nothing but bad hairdressers and the mentally stupid and challenged and sick, running business as Sensi implodes against the walls. So, see, I didn't mean to mess up anybody's Black Panther party. That's a saying from a movie, by the way. It is about something that I have been documenting for 5 years across the board in whatever subject I'm speaking about. And that is the probable cause for all this gang stalking, cyber theft, collusion, different communities, and what you call this virtual reality TV that actually made it to mainstream. And even farther than that, to every country, so they could see why everything was destroyed from the inside. Because like I said, when you hit me with the MPs and protected airspace, and the Google Dot picked it all up and saw it, and I've already identified the guilty. Hey, just because you guys do it, just because you want to kill yourself, doesn't mean there's people out here that don't agree with you guys. So yeah, pretty sickening. And, here again, It is all compiled from the before and the after for ease for someone to look at, but nothing at all is open, and that is part of the breakdown of the internet. And I do hope it all helped. I await a sensible response because I will never deal with that fraud department on the phone digitally, because that is how all this happened. And that's really sad. But we'll see how it works out. I'd love my opportunity to fix a lot of problems that I watched happen when I was a young businesswoman and I watched the industries fail and the quality of service be just completely faked. And then people want to know why we don't have a great economy. Quit faking it till you make it, man. All right. I think I did plenty, proved my case, showed the bank thing, of course, proved the money was there, then showed it wasn't, and oh, this is a great one, like where you show the real credit card payment that they say never happened because it wasn't enough. You know, I was supposed to have $688, but I could only afford $200, and wrote the note, and you remember the whole dance. When you're dealing with machines, this is what we get. Yep, $688. And the payment due date is 10/10, and this receipt is from 10/8. And that's why I say something very, 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 very bad. I mean, really bad that nobody's answered to. For anybody that's ever balanced a checkbook. Something really bad happened between August 2020 and September 2020, where the question, why is there no available credit? Can you see that? Now, no one can sit down and look at the paperwork during these times. So that is why I did this. Because, see, I'd like to send this to US Bank. You know, I go in, I edit it, I get the snippet, send it. But there's been way too much hacking in there. And like I told you, they've been watching me behind the scenes 24/7 for years because they wanted to find one honest person. So when you can prove I've not been honest, or that you're sane and sensible and have done a great life's work, then you're part of the problem. And that's sad. Because this is what people are crying about, because now they're stuck in the matrix in a damn video game instead of living out in the real world. Some people just said, screw it, and others didn't. And the bank said, screw it. So that's why nobody can talk to me about that, because they're not educated enough. When my grandmother worked at the bank, and oh yeah, she did work for the original Edward D. Jones guy, Ted Jones, whatever his name was. I was a kid. Ed Jones. There's been Ed, Ted, Ed, you know, somebody look it up. She worked at Mercantile Bank, had a safe deposit box, the whole 9 yards. That's where the secret documents were, and all the stock and bond stuff and the thingamajigs. So And see, if I just croak and stay croaked, somebody like Katie Roby could assume my identity and get my grandmother and grandfather's stocks. So, I'm done. Oh, and we'll see about this Lowe's thing. 1 minute you're buying lumber there. 1 minute it's a super hotel right across from Busch Stadium. So we got to play ball someday. Toodles.